Now, Nagaiah acted as a hero. Suddenly, all of us, as I said, remember him only as an elderly man. Unfortunately for him, right at this time when this particular movie, this Vande Mataram alias Mangala Sutram, became a major hit, Vahini Studios produced their next film, which was called Sumangali. And it's a film about widow remarriage. And in that, B.N. Reddy decided to cast Nagaiah as an elderly man. See, he was born in 1904. This was 1940-41. So he was only around 35 at that time when he was going to act as a very elderly person with a wig and a grey wig and a mustache, and he had to adopt a elderly gait in the film. He was not very happy about it. But remember, in those days, the studio bosses were the absolute bosses. This was the height of the studio system at one time. I mean, you had Vasan, you had Nayappan, and then you had you had B.N. Reddy, and later Nagi Reddy. You didn't go against what the studio bosses told you because you are a studio staffer. You are employed by the studio itself. And therefore, with some reluctance, he takes this role and he models his acting entirely on the freedom fighter Kandukuri Veeres, not freedom fighter, the social reformer Kandukuri Veeresalingam Pantulu. And he models himself completely on that, the way he dresses, the way he looks, the way he acts. And he gets very noticed in this particular film as an elderly man. This, unfortunately, is going to become the beginning of a typecast for a very long period of time. Now, all of this is Telugu cinema. At this time, he also gets noticed in Tamil. The same year as Sumangali is on the floors, he is now outside of Vahini. He is acting for a film starring M.K. Tyagaraja Bhagavathar and Kannamba, and the film is called Ashok Kumar. And he acts as the Emperor Ashoka, and Tyagaraja Bhagavathar acts as his son, and Kannamba acts as Trishya Rakshite, who is the wife of the Emperor Ashoka, but who falls in love with one of the sons of Ashoka. So she is a wife, she's a concubine or a co-wife, so to speak. And so she lusts, I shouldn't say falls in love, she lusts after one of the sons of Ashoka and all the complications that come about because of that. And there, as you can see, very majestic. Nagaiah was very tall after all. And he begins to be noticed from this particular film onwards as a actor in Tamil. And thereafter, he begins regularly acting in Tamil films. Eventually, when the final tally is done, I think there were probably around 200 and odd Tamil films in which Nagaiah had acted. So for a person who was completely born and brought up in Andhra, it was a great accomplishment what he was able to do. In the 1930s, as I said, he was also a freedom fighter. And at this time, we had this remarkable personality in Madras presidency called A.K. Chettiar. A.K. Chettiar was a journalist. He was a man who had traveled widely. He had trained in cinema. And in the 1930s, A.K. Chettiar wanted to make a film on Mahatma Gandhi. Remember, Gandhi was alive at that time. So, A.K. Chettiar traveled extensively to wherever Gandhi was. He sourced footage. And finally, in the face of great difficulty, he made a film on Gandhi. And it was, they say that it was actually seen by Gandhi himself. The film was made in Tamil, it was then dubbed in Telugu, and it was also dubbed in Hindi. Finally, in 1953, it would be released in English in the United States of America. Ironically, that English version is the only version that has been retraced and which is now available. The Tamil, Telugu and the Hindi versions have all vanished. A.K. Chettiar wrote a wonderful book, which is Annal Adichuvattil, which talks about how he made this particular film. In that, of course, he talks very highly about D.K. Patamal, because Patamal sang the songs in the Tamil version, and she refused to take money. And he ends, what is wonderful about this book is, he talks about people who worked with him, he talks about people who worked against him. Also, people who kind of dissuaded him. Rajaji refused to give even 1 rupee. Every reference ends with Valgani Amma. Whether it is Patamal who sang without taking money, or Rajaji who refused to give money, or S.S. Vasan who actively tried to prevent the film from being released, etc., etc. Every reference ends with Valgani Amma. Let us see what he has to talk about Nagaiah. தெலுங்கு படத்தில் இந்த ராட்டை சுற்றும் காட்சிகளுக்கு பாடவே ராட்டினமாம் என்ற தெலுங்கு பாடலை பாடியவர் குமாரி சூரியகுமாரி. இவர் சென்னை மாகாணத்தின் முதல் மந்திரியாக இருந்த ஆந்திர கேசரி டி பிரகாசம் அவர்களின் சகோதரர் புதல்வி. தமிழ் தெலுங்கு படங்களில் தொடக்கத்தில் டைட்டில்கள் வரும்போது வந்தே மாதரம் பாட்டை சேர்ந்து பாடியவர்கள் சித்தூர் வி நாகையாவும் பேஸ்வாடா குமாரி ராஜரத்னமும் ஆவர். மிக அருமையாக பாடினர். சித்தூர் வி நாகையா சிறந்த நடிகர், அது மட்டுமன்று சிறந்த மனிதர். சிறந்த நடிகர்கள் வாழ்க்கையில் சிறந்த மனிதர்களாகவும் திகழ்வது மிக மிக அரிது. நாகையா இதற்கு ஒரு விதிவிலக்கு. வாழ்க நீ அம்மா. So this is what he talks about Nagaiah in this particular. So this is a shot from that particular film of Gandhi, holding a small baby. So that's why I put it in. Around this time, when he is very busy, he is setting songs, he is acting in films. He also acts for the next film of Vahini, which is a film called Devata. And it has 1941. It has shades of negative. Nagaiah is a graduate. He seduces his maidservant and impregnates her in the film. And while this film is being made and it is being released, in a strange situation of life imitating art, the same thing happens in Nagaiah's home. Nagaiah, there is a girl from Andhra who has come to study in Madras. Her name is Jayalakshmi, and she is staying in Nagaiah's house. One day, Nagaiah marries her, and he is very frank about what happened at that point of time. And the biographer is very, very sensitive. He says, under very peculiar circumstances, in a situation where art and life went together, Nagaiah married Jayalakshmi as his third wife. They would not have any children, but she did not meet with the fate of the other two wives, and she lived long, and she was his companion for the rest of his life. Now, repeatedly, these offers of these old men were coming, and he was not very happy with it. He made his own film, and that was called Bhagya Lakshmi. This is just a photograph that I have put from that film, where he plays the hero, a good Samaritan and a hero. I wouldn't say hero, he was more the central character of the film. Nagaiah was not the kind of man who would get into action roles and things like that, but he was the central character in this film, and it was very successful. As a tribute to H.M. Reddy, who gave his first break, he called his film company as Sri Renuka Films, because that was called Sri Renuka Pictures, if you remember. This was called Sri Renuka Films, and they made Bhagya Lakshmi. It was a big success, but he decided that he would continue with Vahini. At this time, in the 1940s, the Saint Pictures was a big genre of filmmaking. You had it in Hindi, you had it in Tamil, you had it in Telugu. These Bhakta, all the titles will be prefaced by Bhakta. Bhakta Nandanar, Bhakta Gora Kumbar, and Bhakta Tukaram or Sant Tukaram. So these saint mythologicals were a big thing. They were earning a lot of money. And Nagaiah for the first time was cast as Bhakta Potana by Vahini Studios in 1941. Potana was a saint in the Andhra tradition in the 14th, 15th century. He is the man who first wrote the Bhagavatam in Telugu. And Nagaiah, again very reluctant to act as the old man, but once again dominated upon by the studio system. So they got him to shave his head, they got him to put the namam, they put on all the clothes on him. And then when they saw him, the cameraman went running out, brought a coconut and broke it at the feet of Nagaiah and said, "This is Potana. Potana has come to life. We don't need anything further than this." And therefore, Nagaiah acts in that particular film. And it must have been very interesting for him, because several years earlier, when S.G. Chittoor had come to Chittoor and had sung, Nagaiah had taken a coconut and broken it at Chittoor's feet, saying that in the Mari Patala, we could have never heard it anywhere else. So the same thing was happening to him once again in this particular film where he was acting, and they broke the coconut and he became Potana. The film itself has lots of songs, and what is very interesting is that there is even a Tyagaraja Kriti sung in Potana's time. And 300-400 years before Tyagaraja. But then those were days when, in Prahlada Charitram, they would be singing Tyagaraja Kirtanes. So they would even sing English songs in Tyagaraja Kirtanes. So, all kinds of things would happen on stage. So in Potana also, there are situations like that. But I have selected another song for you to listen to, and let's see what that is. Thereafter, because he is noticed as Bhakta Potana, he acts in Gemini Studios. What is that film? He acts as Gora Kumbar in a particular film, which I've forgotten. Then he acts in a number of saint roles thereafter, and he becomes very closely associated with that genre as well. So this film, which he acts as...
second story in
I'm sorry about Chakradhari as Gora Kumbar. He acts in that. Then Bhakta Jana, and then finally in 1947 he acts in Yogi Vemana as well. So this is in Chakradhari, and then this is in Bhakta Jana, and this is Yogi Vemana. So all of them are this saint genre films, and he is very much noticed. But in 1945, while all these saint genre films are being made, Nagaiah being Nagaiah, acts in a very different role, which is in a film called Swargasima. Swargasima sees Bhanumati in her first major role as a vamp. And it's the story of a very respectable professor, happily married to a woman with children, and the neighbor is this vamp who comes into their lives, and how she creates chaos and havoc in their life, and finally, everything, all good triumphs at the end, after the vamp has had all her fun. In my opinion, the vamps always had all the fun in every film in Hindi and Tamil and Telugu. The heroine cried right through the movie. And finally, when the film was ending, the hero reunited with his wife. So this is how these films are made. Nagaiah set the music for this movie, and you saw him taking from Ravindra Sangeet. You saw him taking from Tyagaraja. Let's see how he is creating a wonderful, happy tune for a cycling song. Now, cycle, remember, this was 1945-46, the war was just coming to an end. Petrol was in great rationing, and cycles were encouraged everywhere across the country. People had to cycle. And so the song comes at a very timely moment. It shows a very happy family cycling and singing together. So let us see this particular song. Chalo Chalo Cycle, that's the tune.
మిమ్మల్ని చూస్తున్నట్టుగా ఉంది మీకు అదే ఫేస్ ఉంది.
So the Chalo Chalo Cycle, the woman who's singing is Jayamma, who plays the role of his wife. A fantastic singer. You can see that soprano which she gives in the beginning, and she later on would act with Nagaiah and Tyagaiah also, which was his magnum opus. She plays the role of Tyagaraja's wife in that particular movie. Now this is a very happy scene where the family is all together, and now we have the Patra Pravesham of the vamp. Just see the way they create this drama around Bhanumati, the way she enters as the vamp, and then the symbolism of the vamp itself as an evil woman. Just see the way this is done. Again, with just the music, and of course, Bhanumati's stunning presence in the screen. You can see that the character is in strong shadows, and then when she stands by the window, there is a spider's web behind her to indicate that she is the spider that's going to ensnare the hero into her trap. And the bird is not able to fly, it is caught tightly in her clutches, and every 2 seconds she makes a move as though she is going to release it, and then she catches it back, releases it, catches it back. And finally, when she releases it, you realize that it's a flightless bird, it can only walk. It's not flying. And then she'll jump again in the next situation and catch it once again. I'm told that that entire effect of that that was created by a cone that was placed on top of Bhanumati's head. As it moved around, I believe that peculiar sound effect was created in order to bring about that, that sense of evil that manifests itself. Now in 45, with Swargasima becoming a very big hit, Nagaiah suddenly chooses to play second fiddle to M.S. Subbulakshmi of all people in Meera. He becomes the Maharana of Mewar in this particular movie. Lots of people were thought of, including G.N. Balasubramanian, surprisingly. And not very surprisingly, Mr. Sadasiva must have rejected that particular name and said, no, we don't want it. But they finally zeroed in on Nagaiah to play the role of the Maharana. The same film, later on, it would be dubbed in Hindi as well, and then he would reprise the same role in it. There is one duet that he sings with M.S. Subbulakshmi. You remember that when we heard him sing with Kanchanamala, he takes on the higher pitches because he is the stronger voice. Now just see how he sacrifices himself when Subbulakshmi is the more powerful voice. And just see how this duet pans out in this film.
Miss Balakshmi.
எந்த நீயும் மறந்தாய் போலும்